The biggest game of the week coming up this week, Drew, in college football. Penn State Nittany Lions traveling to Ohio State to play Ryan Day and the Buckeyes. Both teams undefeated. And a lot of people believe that with this Drew Aller at quarterback for Penn State, they are primed to take the next step up. These two teams both have a lot in common. Great defenses, first-year starting quarterbacks, and at the beginning of the season, both have had a little bit of trouble with their O-line play, which has resulted in some mishaps on offense that has frustrated both the fan bases respectfully. One thing I will say about this game, though, Drew, before I kick it to you, Ryan Day, 35-0 versus Big Ten opponents that are not Michigan, okay? Coach Franklin, on the other hand, for Penn State, 4-14 in games versus Michigan and Ohio State. Penn State's been at the cusp before. Do you think that this is the year that they can go and get it done versus Ohio State?
I think if it's going to be any year, Aiden, it's got to be this year. It's time for James Franklin, the Penn State Nittany Lions, to prove something. You hear about people talking about how Ryan Day needs to prove this and prove that. That's bull honky. I'm sorry. 35-0 against teams that are not against Michigan in the Big Ten is an absolutely incredible feat. It's James Franklin and Penn State who I think the pressure's really on in this game. And I do think Penn State has the team this year compared to other years where they can do it and beat either Ohio State or Michigan. It's time for Penn State to take that next step forward. With Sean Clifford, I feel like he was just kind of that guy, that game-managing quarterback that can't win you a lot of games with his arm. However, Drew Aller, first-year starting quarterback, hasn't thrown a single interception this year, has looked really good. He's been accurate. And there's been a little bit of concerns for people in terms of Penn State not being an explosive offense, not being able to take a lot of shots downfield. Now, the question I have for these people off the rip is when they talk about Penn State's explosiveness. Does Penn State have the ability to do that? Or has Penn State just not been in a position where they've had to do that? This is going to be a game, Aiden, where Penn State's going to have to get a little explosive and take some shots down the field. They have a really good running back tandem in Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, both guys who are going to be playing on Sundays. But there is going to be points in this game where I think Penn State's going to have to take the top off this Ohio State defense because, as you mentioned, Ohio State has a really good defense just like Penn State. Ohio State's defense has taken a step much forward than where they were a year ago, and especially in stopping the run. So Penn State and Drew Aller, the explosive plays are going to have to come into this game, and they're going to have some drives maybe where they score quickly.
Yeah, Drew, talking about this Penn State team, a lot of people have been critical on the offense, but they are the only team in the country that is both undefeated in record and undefeated against the spread. So they have been able to get it done. And another thing, the offensive coordinator for Penn State himself has said that his preferred personnel is 3 receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 running back. Because of the personnel strengths that Penn State has, obviously, they're forced to use 2 tight ends, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. So with that being the case, you're not going to see, obviously, as many explosive plays out of these heavy formations, especially having a defense like they have. Also, strength of schedule does play a factor. They're just running the ball down these teams' throats and relying on their absolutely prolific defense, which I'm going to get into. One passing touchdown for 7 interceptions from this defense. That is absolutely tremendous. They're second in the country on third downs as a defense. And it's not often that you see a Penn State or an Ohio State have guys in their 3rd, 4th, and 5th year on this defense. Both of these defenses are a veteran bunch, and you can tell that from watching both of these defenses. Ohio State last year defensively took over the game with their defensive line.
Yeah, and Penn State's defense is absolutely electric. And when you look at Ohio State's defense and you look at last year's game of what happened, Ohio State with JTT, defender, the linebacker for Ohio State, absolutely took over that game and single-handedly pretty much won Ohio State that game. Now, Ohio State's defense, again, has been very stout. They've been really good at stopping the run. But one thing I do want to mention that's kind of a concern if I'm looking at Ohio State, both on the offensive line and defensive line, is in the sacks category. Right now, Penn State currently is number 1 in sacks, with 27 total sacks, averaging 4.5 per game. Ohio State, on the other hand, has not been able to get the quarterback down a whole lot. And they played some teams that passed the ball a decent amount. But right now, Ohio State is currently at 105th in total sacks forced. So with that being said, with Drew Aller being the way that he is, he's able to pick you apart, in the intermediate and short stuff. Ohio State's going to have to find ways to get pressure on him. I mean, that's just no secret. I mean, I guess that's the key to really any game. But just looking at this defensive line for Ohio State, it hasn't really been what people expected it to in terms when it comes to disrupting the passer. Now, when it comes to stopping the run, I think Ohio State's defense has done a terrific job, and the front has done a terrific job. And they're going to have to step up in this game and continue to stop this run that Penn State has. Because if I'm Penn State, the number one thing I'm going to look at doing is trying to keep the ball on the ground with your running backs. I mean, that's something that they've been able to do throughout the course of the entire season. So why would they stop here? I think Penn State's going to come out and they're going to try to do that, maybe take a shot downfield. But there's going to be times, like I said before, where Penn State's going to have to hit on some electric plays. And the good counter to that is stopping the explosive plays that Penn State might try to hit on you is to get pressure on Drew Aller. We haven't really seen a whole lot of him taking shots downfield. We don't know what he's really capable of doing, but I'm here to tell you right now, Aiden, when you have a quarterback that's getting pressured and trying to make a throw downfield, it's not easy. It is not easy in the slightest. So that's one thing I'm going to take a look at as the game goes on there, Aiden. And then we also have some questions about Ohio State's offense. They obviously haven't ran the ball very well at all. And Kyle McCord, he's not a CJ Stroud. I don't think people expected him to be a CJ Stroud by any means. He's looked okay at times, but he's been getting off to some slow starts in a lot of these games.
Yeah, this Ohio State offense has not had the running game that you would expect them to have, especially considering that they have a first-year starting quarterback, Kyle McCord, who a lot of fans were criticizing earlier in the year, not so much the last couple of games for how he's been playing, but he's not a bad quarterback. He has been having protection issues. He has not had time to throw the football. And one thing about this Ohio State offense that I've seen is they have to call plays specifically for Marvin Harrison Jr. rather than just calling a pass play and Kyle McCord finding Marvin Harrison Jr. And when I'm watching some tape on Ohio State, he's getting ticked off a couple of times when he's on the backside of a trips formation and he's not getting the ball. But that's just growing pains with dealing with the first-year starting quarterback. They do have weapons. One of my favorite weapons, obviously, other than Marvin Harrison, is their tight end Stover. I talk about it all the time. When you have a good tight end like him who can find open space underneath, you can always check it down to a great tight end like that. As far as how this game goes, I am taking the under in the first half. First-year starting quarterback on both sides. Drew Aller has not played in a game this big in his collegiate career. Kyle McCord obviously beat top 10 Notre Dame. That was a big win for him and a confidence booster for him. And when I look at Ohio State, last game they had a couple of guys out and they just went and absolutely spanked their opponent. So I'm a little bit higher on Ohio State's offense than a couple of people are. I think it's an execution thing, and these guys haven't had, to play a Penn State or an Ohio State yet, the team that they think is on their level. And I think that they'll rise to the occasion when that comes. But Penn State under Coach Franklin, 0-9 versus top 10 opponents when playing away. I cannot go against Ryan Day and Ohio State until I've seen it. Now, I love what I've seen from Penn State. I think that barring Penn State playing Ohio State and Ryan Day, I would pick Penn State to beat anybody. I really think that Penn State is that good. But whenever you're talking about home field advantage for an Ohio State team that's been there and done that, defensively, they're veterans. I'm leaning towards Ohio State here.
Yeah, and then I thought about this, and I've gone back and forth a couple times about this game between Penn State and Ohio State, and then you start looking at the stats. Now, obviously, history and what's happened in the past few years doesn't have anything to do with what's going to happen in this year's game. But when you look at 35-0 against Big Ten opponents not named Michigan is a big deal. Ryan Day just knows how to win these games. And you look at James Franklin, this has been a guy who's been a constant disappointment in the big games. And you made a good point. Until you see it, it's hard to pick it. It's hard to pick Penn State in this game. And I initially thought about picking Penn State in this game. Now, one thing about Penn State, too, that I really like about them, this is the last thing I'm going to say about Penn State, is their special teams. Daquan Hardy, and this is against UMass, so you guys can take it for what it's worth, was absolutely electric in returning the football on the punt return. Penn State's going to have to find ways to win special teams as well. When you look at Penn State, on special teams, defense, whatever, there's a lot of categories I think that you give the edge to Penn State to. Ohio State is the home team here, and they're really good at home. I had Penn State initially, Aiden, but I think I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go with Ohio State. I think they're going to win. I don't think they're going to cover, though. I think this is going to be a field goal game. This is going to be a game that, like I said before, is going to be won through the air. I just have a bad feeling that the fact that Penn State hasn't had to throw deep and have Drew Aller throw them into a game, I think it's going to come back and haunt them a little bit just because they haven't had that experience in doing so under adversity. And we see it time and time again when teams haven't had that game time experience with doing something. When it comes time to do it and when they need to do it, they can't always deliver. So with all that being said, I'm going to take Ohio State. They're not going to cover the 4.5 points, which basically just means it's going to be a field goal game. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We already posted a preview and prediction for Alabama, Tennessee a day ago. If you guys could go show that video some love, it'd be much appreciated. And as always, be sure to leave down below in the comment section your opinion, who you got in this game between Penn State or Ohio State, the keys to the game, and maybe some points that we might have missed. You can leave down below in the comment section as well. But that's going to do it, guys. We'll see you in the next one.